Well, thank you for the heads up there, dude. I forgot that it auto mutes when you do the videos. So today we're doing the 4th of July pickups. We got Jester, Mikey, and Mason from Facebook in the house. Those guys have helped me avoid a huge disaster here by pointing that out. So, normally I would feature featured trailers during these, but, I had some technical issues beforehand. So I didn't have the time to get those uploaded, but in the future, I'm going to make sure that we have those on there. So apologies for that, guys. And apologies for the false start there. This is the second time we've done a 4th of July pickup special. It tends to be one of Full Moon's bigger sales of the year. I don't got to tell you guys that, especially you, Mikey. We got a lot of good stuff at it. We have 12 issues of Delirium we're going to take a peek at. And then we have 9 movies that we're going to showcase in addition to 2 replicas. And we are going to discuss some issues that I think Full Moon needs to address when it comes to certain things that have been kind of bothering me. Nothing too serious, but stuff that I think, we would all like them to remedy so that things can be better going forward. Cheers to you as well, Mikey. Thanks for stopping by, man. It really warms the heart that you're taking the time to check out my Full Moon content. It's probably what an Elvis impersonator might feel like if the actual Elvis came and watched one of his sets, So without wasting any more time, we're just going to jump into this. Once again, apologies for the lack of the trailers. You guys know I usually roll with featured trailers as often as possible. The way that I do it is I use Clip Grab to just steal them from YouTube, right? And then I just upload them to StreamYard. In the future, I'm just going to cut out the middleman. I'm going to use my capture card to capture the, trailers from the discs themselves and then just upload that directly to StreamYard. That way, if, 1 or 2 of the applications doesn't want to work, it won't matter because I'm just mainlining the stuff right into the fucking StreamYard, Michael McNally is in here, so I guess it's a good thing that I started on mute because a stream can't officially begin over here until Michael is in the house, so... What's up, buddy? Jester, Mikey says that he did order his Leech Woman replica and the 4th of July mystery bag and the 30th issue of Delirium, which we will be taking a look at briefly tonight. I was considering doing the mystery bag, but I blew quite the wad on these 2 replicas, plus all the other stuff that I got, so it just wasn't in the cards. Maybe next time. I'll have a video on it, of course, like I do all my Full Moon stuff. Yeah, you guys definitely need to get over there and check out Jester Mikey's channel. He does not fuck around. He's the OG Full Moon dude on YouTube, as far as I'm concerned. And he's got just a wealth of videos for you to check out if you want to see not only new stuff, but old, retro video store promo shit and all that kind of stuff. Mikey's got you covered. All right, so how we're going to rock this is we're going to take a look at 3 movies, and then we're going to take a look at 4 issues of Delirium, and then we're just going to rinse and repeat. So here we go. First off, we got a couple of remasters that aren't super new. Actually, I think End of the World here might be kind of new. I'd been wanting to snag these for a while. I already own the movies, but I didn't have the remastered editions of them. I imagine eventually I'll double dip and get the Blu-rays as well, just have more stuff to collect. But, first up, obviously, we've got Christopher Lee in End of the World here. Not a great film. It's kind of a good example of old school movie producers tricking big name stars into being in movies that are worse than they can comprehend at the time. I think Christopher Lee was pretty shocked when he realized how bad this movie was, but I still really enjoy it. It's one that I've got a little bit of a history with because you would see it on all those Mill Creek sci-fi box sets and shit like that. So pretty cool little tidbit from the early Charlie Band days, but in terms of actually good sci-fi films, there's much better options even from Charlie Band in the Charlie Band production days. But I really like it. I like the design of the aliens. I like the involvement of the nuns and everything like that. And seeing Christopher Lee slum it up in something like this is always a treat. So there's that. Now this next film I have nothing but good things to say about, and that is Shrunken Heads. I think most of us that are fans of the 90s Full Moon catalog would consider this a classic. It's definitely probably the best example in their library of a movie that easily could have went either way. You know, if there was a little bit less sexual innuendo and violence in this, it easily could have been a Moonbeam movie. Or if there was a lot more sexual innuendo and violence in it, it easily could have fit in with like later Full Moon stuff in the 90s, like, you know, Head of the Family or Blood Dolls or Hideous, any of those kinkier movies that they were starting to do for a bit there. It walks the line between the two pretty expertly, in my opinion. And it's got a pretty banging score on there. It's got an Oingo Boingo song up in that bitch. No One Lives Forever is the title of the track. A lot of you probably recognize it from the bridge scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I would argue I probably have more memories of seeing it in this, but that's just because of, you know, the time frame that I was seeing those movies. I haven't checked this out yet. I just kind of pre-opened all these so we didn't have that saran wrap glare going on when I was trying to show them off. It doesn't look like it has any special features on it outside of what was on the original release of Shrunken Heads, but it's remastered from the original uncut 35mm camera negative. So I'll probably end up getting a little drunk on watching that tonight, eating a bunch of tater tots. I've got a big old bag of them I got to get rid of. And then we got, of course, a copy of Baby Oopsie. Now, I don't know how many of you guys have gotten out and checked this out, but I was thoroughly impressed by it. I wasn't expecting to be. I fully thought that it was going to be junk, but you know, it's always cool when they can surprise you and do something that sort of reminds you why Full Moon is Full Moon, why we love them so much. You know, sure, they release some junk nowadays, but I think that there's movies like this or Necropolis or Ouija's that show a lot of potential that Full Moon could eventually sort of get back to the same standard that they were in the 90s, or at least closer to it than they've been in a long time. Very much looking forward to the next chapters of this. I believe Baby Oopsie Murder Dolls is the next one that's coming out, and it looks pretty rad. I'm just a fan of killer doll stuff, so they maybe get a little bit more leeway in terms of suckage than other movies would. But you know, if it's half as good as Baby Oopsie was, I'm sure I'll be pleased with it. So, yeah, that's our first stack of films there. It looks like Mason says that he can't wait for Chapter 2 as well as the Dr. Death spinoff. I sure as hell hope it's better than the movie Dr. Death originates from, because I fucking hate Retro Puppet Master. But I do find it pretty comical, so I don't know. I'm torn on it. I mean, I almost included him in this order, but I just couldn't justify spending the money for a puppet that I don't give a shit about. But maybe that movie will change that, you know. I have high hopes for it, especially after Baby Oopsie, because honestly, Baby Oopsie's probably better than all the Demonic Toys stuff outside of the first Demonic Toys, in my mind. Dollman versus Demonic Toys is fun, but that doesn't really count as like a straight Demonic Toys movie. Demonic Toys 2 was okay, but Baby Oopsie was pretty rad. So it kind of makes me wish that they would do ones for the other toys, but they don't really have personality. I think it would just be a clip show of death. Carnage, you know. Jester Mikey says he's looking forward to seeing both movies as well. Yeah, they're up there. I think my most anticipated one was Piranha Woman, and now that that's out, there's not a ton that I'm like super antsy to see, because we all know Subspecies 5 isn't coming anytime soon. But those are definitely ones I'm stoked to check out. I still got to get caught up on the Resonator episodes. I don't know if you guys have seen the new ones of that yet. I think they've got like all 3 parts of it out or whatever, or all 6 episodes, however you want to swing that. But really hoping to check that out here soon. So I'm kind of trying to wait until they put it out physically, though. I'd like to just have it on the shelf so I can watch it at my leisure without worrying about my shitty internet connection screwing it up for me. With that said, hopefully I'm coming through pretty clear here. Hopefully StreamYard's doing its job and compensating for my shit in the background. Mason says, I see Jack Attack and 6-Shooter star in a spin-off film. That'd be cool. I'd like to see that. If that exists and I'm somehow not aware of it, you know, definitely help me out with finding that. We got Tyler in this bitch. What's up, buddy? Anyway, our first of our Delirium issues here is a Dario Argento cover issue. Looks like he's the main feature in it. We also got article on Goblin. We got Steve Moore, Andy Sedaris, Extremity, Bloody Ballet, The Witch Who Came from the Sea, and more. So we're going to address a pretty serious problem that Delirium has going on now, but we're going to do that after we get through the fun stuff here. Our next issue after that is a subspecies issue. We got Ted Nicolau and Anders Hove reflect on the Fanged franchise. And then we've also got Nightmare Cinema, Gremlins, The Burbs, Ice Cream Man, and Phil Fondacaro. So that should be a fun issue as well. After that, we've got the 90s Rewind issue. This is one that me and my kid are especially excited about. A lot of people hate on 90s horror, and I can understand it. It's probably the weakest decade of horror in modern history. But there's still a lot of fun stuff that I have nostalgia from that time. I mean, those were my formative years, you know. I was born in the 80s, but I grew up in the 90s. It's just how it worked out. So all the shit that has to do with like the video store era applies to all of us, whether you were doing it in 1984 or 1994. So I'm very curious to check that out. It's got stuff on, you know, like Heather Langenkamp, Mick Garris, Bride of Chucky, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Clive Barker, New Nightmare, Robert Englund, Devon Sawa, The Blair Witch Project, and more. Yeah, they could probably miss me with that Blair Witch article, but other than that, I'm stoked on it. And then this one I'm definitely hyped on as well, and that is the Sybil Danning feature. She's great. You know, if you've watched B-movies for any length of time, you're probably familiar with Sybil Danning, or you've probably seen her even if you don't recognize the name. She's talking specifically about her 80s VHS action classic Panther Squad, which Full Moon actually distributes at the moment. We've also got articles on The Howling 2, Jackie Kong, Hitchhike to Hell, Video Store Memoirs, Eurocine, Kansas Bowling, and more. So looks like that will be a fun one and a solid one to follow up the VHS like 90s Rewind issue as well. So that does it for the first four of our Delirium issues there. I am going to wet the whistle here because I'm getting mad cotton mouth. I'm getting over being sick, or I just got over being sick, but apparently I'm not quite out of the woods yet because still got a bit of a runny nose and still a little bit achy. You know, I had like 100-degree fever on Sunday, and thankfully that broke before the end of the night, but the next day was pretty dicey, and then here we are. I'm feeling pretty good today, but still a little worse for the wear, I guess. I'm having enough fun, though. I'm not really noticing it. Jester Mikey says he'd like to see that, too. I'd also like to see Jester, Decapitron, and Torch have their own spin-off movies, if that ever happens. I think we're more likely to see, like, the Jester one than the other two, just because it would be easier for them to do. And we all know that they take that route sometimes. But it would be really cool. Those would probably be my selections for the puppets to get standalone movies as well. If Six Shooter would be a heavy contender for me, though, also. So I'm going to go ahead and blow my nose, guys. It'll take me just a second, and then we'll take a look at our next movies and our next mags. All right. Sorry, I was pretty sure you guys didn't want to watch that shit. Lost a bunch of viewers by doing that, but you know, I'm sure I'd have lost them either way if I'd have just been fucking blasting that off on screen, you know. I don't like even watching the people blow their nose in public, so watching them do it in a fucking live stream where they have the ability to not do it right in front of your face would just bug me out. So I didn't want to subject you guys to that. So we're kind of diving into some sleaze with the last two stacks of films here. Many of you guys that have been following for a while know that I don't just collect the mainline Full Moon stuff. It's not just all about cute puppets and baked goods and, you know, bongs and all that shit. I also go in for the grindhouse stuff. I definitely go in for the exploitation films and the softcore cinema and all that stuff. Charlie Band has always sort of had a hand in that over the years. He's never shied away from dabbling in the sleaze, you know, and we've got several examples of that here. Some of them more modern than others. but some of them dating all the way back to the 70s. I believe our first film here was actually released right around the same time as the original Star Wars, and that is Cinderella. This looks like pretty much what you would expect. It's just like a sex comedy musical version of the Cinderella story. Absolutely stunning artwork there on the Blu-ray. Can't say that I'm familiar with it outside of just watching the trailer and being like, yo, that looks fucking hilarious. I've got to own that. So, I made a mental note to grab it when I could get it for half off, because not only have they raised the price of the Blu-rays, but I would prefer to buy the smuttier stuff at a discount. Just makes me feel less filthy if I'm not paying full price. But yeah, there it is, Cinderella. And to accompany that, I got the remastered Blu-ray of Fairy Tales, which is very much the same sort of a thing. I'm not sure which year this one came out. Looks like it came out in 78, so it was like basically the follow-up that they did the next year. It's got, production supervision by Richard Band. It was produced by Charles Band. It's got cinematography by Daniel Band, who I'm not sure if he's related to them or not. Maybe you could confirm that, Mikey. I've never heard that name thrown around in the Full Moon camp, and maybe that's because he's like a relative that wasn't doing stuff with them after these days. But yeah, it looks like, Charles at least produced both of these, and it looks like with Fairy Tales, the bands were a little bit more involved. So very interesting, sort of a precursor to some of the sleazier, sexier films that they would do later on, like Cassex, This is a great example of a fantastical, goofy sort of sci-fi sex comedy that Full Moon has recently put out. I think this came out maybe beginning of the year or tail end of last year. I can't quite recall. It looks like it was 2021, so I'm guessing tail end of last year. And from what I gather, it's basically these people find this camcorder and they start watching the tape on there, and then it starts, fucking sucking them into some sex dimension or something like that, and they've got to like sex it up to escape. I don't know. I watched the trailer once. I was pretty fucking ripped, but it looked fun, and I'm trying to get up to date with their, current releases, so I had to have it. I don't know. I guess now's a good time to ask you guys, what are some upcoming new releases from Full Moon that you're looking forward to as far as physical stuff? I think all the shit that they've announced, other than Trancers, the remasters, I have, and those are probably would be my like most anticipated ones anyways. I would really like to see all of the Trancers movies released on Blu-ray remastered, so that we have a higher hope of getting like some type of a box set in the future. It'd be really nice to see like, one that's on par with like, probably not the Puppet Master set, but I don't know. It'd be cool to get a decorative Trancers box set, because we don't really have that. There's that one from like Kangaroo Entertainment or whatever that they did with Full Moon where it's kind of basic, but I'd like to see one that's like, I don't know, at least on par with that Evil Bong box set that they did. I think that I would really also like to see them eventually remaster the Subspecies movies and put them all in a box set that is like coffin shaped or something with like a little Bloodstone replica in it. They could just take $250 of my money today if they announce that. So, just something to think about, Charlie. Sam says Trancers 5 remastered would be great. Also a box set. That it would, my friend. Chris Seaver says he wants Dr. Alien on Blu-ray badly. I would agree. That is definitely one that I would love to see on Blu-ray because it deserves it. Tylord says he'd love a box set as well. And Sam says, damn, Dr. Alien, I need it. You can get the, regular edition of it from Full Moon. It's not great video quality, but it's not the worst. I mean, if you have like an old TV, it'll feel like you're just watching the tape you rented back in the day. Primeval's much like that Subspecies box set, or even just seeing all those remastered and Subspecies 5 actually happen, are, distant dreams that we can all hope will happen one day. But there's no guarantee, my friends. In fact, there's probably a higher chance that it's just inevitably delayed and delayed and delayed. I'm trying to be optimistic about it, but it seems like instead of just throwing a few grand down to, finish up that stop motion or whatever, Charles would rather just make Bong movies and then, stuff that is not part of the Deadly 10. So, hopefully he gets on it eventually. After seeing Mad God, and seeing how well that's doing. I mean, I haven't seen the movie, but just seeing it exist and seeing people hyped on a stop motion movie, there's a market for it still. So if he just, instead of doing anything else, just focused all his money on Subspecies 5 and finishing Primevals, they could probably pay for like the next 5 years worth of fucking projects from just those movies, you know, and the merchandise that could go with them. He needs to stop finding these things in his vault. He just needs to give us the fucking Subspecies remasters as well. It's so bizarre that I think it's like Subspecies 4 just doesn't have a Blu-ray. Maybe it's possible that, you know, the master for that was destroyed or something, but I don't know if I buy that. I think he strategically waits to release those when he needs a cash injection. That's just my personal opinion, but I could be wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. All right. So we're going to be checking out our next 4 issues of Delirium here, and this is another pretty fun run that I'm excited to read through and eventually review. We've got an Al Adamson Lives exclusive interview here in this issue. We've also got Sam Sherman remembers an exploitation film icon. I'm guessing also talking about Al Adamson. David Gregory on his acclaimed documentary Blood and Flesh, The Real Life and Ghastly Death of Al Adamson. A closer look at Al Adamson's Dracula versus Frankenstein, and the photography of Bruce Pittman. We've also got Hammer's The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, William Sanderson on Fight for Your Life, and much, much more. So that looks like that's going to be an enjoyable issue as well. Super looking forward to checking out this one, though, because I'm a big John Waters fan, and I actually do like Cecil B. Demented a lot, and this is like an anniversary thing looking back on that film. You've got, you know, Arlene Sedaris remembers Guns, Claudia Jennings, Blue Oyster Cult, Harry Kummel on Daughters of Darkness, Nick Castle Talks, Tag, The Assassin Game, and more. But really, it's all about that John interviews, 20 years of Cecil B. fucking interview. Can't wait to check that out. And then following that up directly, we have the Roger Corman feature. This is just him talking about, you know, 40 years of Humanoids from the Deep. One of my favorite crappy creature features ever made. And, you know, then you've got a bunch of other stuff like Corman's Greatest Creatures. Debbie Rochon is featured in this. Chris would probably enjoy that. We've got John Harrison talks Tales from the Dark Side, the movie. That should be interesting. An article on Miskatonic U and more. So good stuff in there as well. Now, the most glaring issue that I guess we will talk about before we dive into our next stack here is the fact that for some reason, and I'm sure some of you guys can agree with me, or would probably just, you hear me out. With issue 18 of Delirium, for some reason, they just decided to stop including centerfold posters. They skipped issue 8 and 9, but then they came back with the posters up until issue 15, which they also skipped. And then with issue 16 and 17, they brought the posters back. And then with 18 all the way up to issue 30, they've just stopped including the centerfold posters, which, okay, given the price increase of Delirium, is absolute bullshit. I mean, we all know that like getting the centerfold poster is half the fun of buying a horror mag. You know, anybody that grew up with Fangoria and crap like that and ripping those out and pasting them on your wall was one of the more exciting things of getting the mag. Of course, you've got all the other content that's in there, but that poster was a huge deal. At least it always was for me. So to be paying now not $10, but like $12 instead of $10 for it, just to see 2 more pages of ad space for a magazine I'm already buying direct from the fucking studio, it has me a little furious. I'm not going to lie. I was really stoked to get caught up with Delirium because I was going to try to like subscribe and pay full price for the magazines to try and encourage them to keep coming out and like becoming better. But we're already going downhill with them and the price went up. I mean, it can't cost that much to print those 2 extra pages. And they still factor out to be about the same page count. It's just there's like a couple extra ads for the Full Moon streaming app in there or some shit, you know. Got me a bit peeved. That being said, though, I did get however many 18 minus 4 is, so 14 posters I've gotten from collecting Delirium so far, and that's not bad, but I should have 30 is what I'm saying, and I don't think that's me being greedy. So Chris says, Subspecies 5 is pretty much the only reason I still give a crap about Full Moon at all. I haven't liked anything they've done since the late 90s. That's fair. Except for Ginger Dead Man 2, because they had a blast ripping themselves and trophy heads because it actually seemed like Charles gave a shit for a moment. I would agree on both of those. Those are both fantastic. I would also submit Zombies vs. Strippers and Ooga Booga as ones that I really enjoy a lot. Outside of that, for the most part, I prefer the 90s. And then he said nothing like 80s Empire and 90s Full Moon. Charles doesn't care about quality. It's all quantity. And, as much as I love the shit, I've always made it a point on this show to be honest about that. And yeah, that's 1000% the case. I think Charles means well sometimes. He wants to give us a bunch of entertainment, so he promises shit like way in advance and way more of it than is feasible for him to complete. And then he ends up just realizing that stuff would require actual time and dedication and money. So then he ends up doing like half of it and then giving us a bunch of mediocre projects on the side. I would much rather have no Full Moon movies for a couple of years and get one that's really, really good than have 8 or 9 in a year. It's just common sense, I guess. But yeah, really pisses me off that they took the posters out of Delirium. We're going to talk about some quality control stuff in a few here when we get to those replicas, because there's some gnarly shit that happened when I opened this package, but we got a little bit more fun stuff to get through before we get there. See, I do like some of the stupid, cheap Full Moon projects. I mean, this is a good example of one that just seems like a blast. That's Attack of the 50-Foot Cam Girl. You got Jim Wynorski up in here directing this turd. It just looks like a fun time. Big old kaiju bimbos fighting, and looks like there's like a sleazy little producer guy that's trying to like make money off of them or whatever. And it definitely seems like it leans into a bit of a gigantism fetish that I wasn't even sure I knew was a thing until someone pointed it out when we were talking about this. But yeah, apparently there's people that get off on the idea of like giant women squishing them or, squeezing them into things. Not my thing, but I imagine I'll get a fair amount of laughs out of the film. We've got, a classic compilation here, Trailer-thon, if you will, or a clip show. And that is Famous TNA 2. Mainly got this one, just for the sake of completionism, because I have the original Famous TNA as part of Full Moon's Grindhouse collection. This is hosted by, Darcy the Male Girl from Joe Bob. And it looks like it's about the same thing the other one was. It's just a bunch of nudie clips and, trailers probably from, old sexy films that Full Moon has done. Mainly focusing on, obviously the tits and ass. It looks like you got Linnea Quigley up in there. You got stuff from Tarzan and his mate, Meridian, Head of the Family, Fairy Tales, Bad Girls at Play, Familia and Cosmic Crush, about the stuff that you'd expect. I'm sure that it's going to be, about as fun as any of those trailer-thons are. They're fine to put on, though, for like just background noise if you need something to keep you occupied on the side. This one is one, though, that I am super excited for. I'm big into giallo films from back in the day, sleazy Italian horror flicks and, all the Dario Argento stuff. But every now and again, you find a little mean-spirited one that makes a reputation for itself for just being nasty. And the way I understand it, Gore in Venice or Gallo in Venice is exactly that. It's just pretty much notorious for having a couple of really, really gnarly kill scenes. And it looks like it's basically, based around the idea of this fucked up couple that's like, just murdering and banging all around Venice or something like that. I don't know. I couldn't find a trailer for it. I did want to include one, but there's no trailers that I could find other than one that's just people's faces with like their names under it. It's not even an actual trailer. All the other ones were just scenes of the infamous kill scenes or whatever, and I don't want to watch those before I watch the movie. So here we are. The trailer uploads didn't work anyways, so it wouldn't have mattered. And then our final 4 issues here of Delirium are a Blackula cover feature. Never really been huge on Blackula, if I'm honest, but I've only ever seen it a couple of times, and I was probably too young to properly appreciate it. So maybe, by the time I get around to reading this, I will have taken the time to go back and revisit it and see if I, can reappraise it with older eyes and appreciate it more. It does have an article on the Kindred which is a movie that I'm super, familiar with, grew up renting it. And it's got a Stuart Gordon interview. So, good stuff all around. All right, then we've got a John Carpenter Ghosts of Mars feature. I don't think any of us needed that, but I'm sure it'll make for an interesting read. You see what he has to say for himself. It's so heavy that like they didn't even advertise anything else on the cover. So, if we were left to assume based on the signage here, this entire thing is just them talking about how terrible that movie is with no poster. So I'd even taken a Ghost of Mars poster. It's just, I don't know. I didn't like that movie. Some people do, but some people are weird. And that's fine. Then we've got an Excella Caroline interview. I'm not super familiar with this lady, but some of the imagery around her looks familiar. So it's possible I've seen her like watching genre films, but the name is escaping me at the moment. Real cool artwork though. And then it's also got a Terror Vision article in there, which I'll be stoked on. Terror Vision is a dope movie from the Empire days. And then you've got Wakali Wood. I don't know what the hell that is, but it sounds interesting. We've got Gene Rollins, Suspiria Land, and more. Really hope Suspiria Land is Dario Argento theme park in Italy or something. It would make me very happy to know something like that exists, but probably doesn't. And then finally, we have, the most up-to-date, the most current issue of Delirium, and that is the Salem's Lot feature. And yeah, it's also got a Tobe Hooper interview, obviously talking about the film, about his 1979 masterpiece. We've got Lance Kerwin, vintage TV horror ads, which I'm really looking forward to. Julie Cobb, Nunsploitation, Moshe Bean, The Russian Bride, and more. So, yeah. Overall, all those issues look interesting. I'm stoked to read them. I don't know, man. Maybe I am being greedy, but I am fucking hung up on the poster thing. I had a whole dream that I could eventually fill this whole wall back here with just framed posters from the Delirium issues, and they were knocking it out of the park for those 14 issues that they did give us posters in. There's Japanese Howling posters in there, and shit for Reanimator posters, and then all types of greasy old Grindhouse movies. I think there was even a Godzilla poster in one of them. It was a nice variety of random posters. It reminded me a lot of the years that I was getting Fangoria, because you ended up with a nice eclectic collage of horror imagery or genre film imagery on your wall, just buying those. And I mean, what am I going to do? Cut out the single page poster things? Because they do have those, but I mean, what am I going to do with something this big? It's not even worth framing. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think on that. Man, these really don't flow as well without the trailers either. Those break it up nicely. I think I've lost half these people's attention right now. But we'll get there. We only have to look at these we just got to look at these replicas. The first one is really the only one that there's any issue with, and that's the second point that I wanted to make in terms of stuff Full Moon needs to work on. And that's some serious quality control when it comes to painting a lot of these replicas and statues that we get off of them. So check this out right here. I ordered Leech Woman as part of the sale. She came with her lovely little leech, and it doesn't really sit in her mouth that well. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to, make it sort of tighter fit so that when I wedge it in there, it will actually stay. But that aside, everything looks good. Her clothes are all stitched up nicely. Everything is intact. But, the issue, and I'm sure it's not showing up very well on camera, is, I mean, just look at the gross texturing on those arms and those hands. And you could tell they only put one layer of paint on it, because you can see the gray primer color showing through from the bottom. She was fully wet still. I mean, I don't know if you could hear that. But she's still fucking tacky, and I've had her out of the box for probably 4 hours. She was wet when she showed up, her hair back here was stuck to the back of her neck and to the back of her arms, because her arms all the way down to her feet is still tacky. her chest here, you can still see the primer coming through. And it's fine, you know, I can repaint her, I can fix it. But the point is, when you pay full price for something like this, or even when you get it at a discount, I mean, how hard is it to just sit there and just put a second coat of paint on her and let it dry before you cram it in the box? You could give them some credit for like putting her out quick and getting her out the door so that she got to my house in a timely fashion. Probably was the quickest I've had a full moon order of this size delivered maybe ever. But it came at a cost, you know. At least everything showed up with them. But this isn't the first time I've had stuff like this happen. As we all know, you know, if you collect the resin statues, pretty much every one of those needs to be repainted when you get it. I mean, they all look like they were painted by like a grade school kid during his lunch break, you know. And it's just, I guess you could say on the one hand, it gives you an excuse to do like a fun art project with it. But on the other hand, if I pay $210 for a replica, I don't want to have to repaint them. That's pretty whack, you know. And I especially don't want her hair stuck to parts of her body and all that junk. We might be able to get her leech to sit in there, though, if she's stationary here. I mean, it will sit in there, but it's just not very sturdy. It's not a snug fit, if you know what I mean. The slightest jostling, and that thing could come tumbling out. And it feels like it's just made of like resin or something. So it could potentially snap in half. So if I'm going to display her with the leech in, which I think any of us would want to do, I'm going to have to try to figure out some way to like tighten up that fit. I don't know how I'll do it. Maybe I can build this up with some type of clay or something like that I just leave on there and then kind of put it into her mouth and like let it harden. So it's not like, but see, I don't know if I want it to be permanently stuck in there. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But yeah, Leech Woman, overall, I'm happy with her. Design is nice. I really like the pink dress with the sequins on it and whatnot. The sculpt looks like it's pretty decent. It's just they fucked up on putting that second layer of latex paint on her limbs and not letting it dry. I was pretty fucking startled by that when I pulled it out of there, because it was like, whoa, why is it all sticky? Did something get in here? Like, I thought almost that something had like leaked into the bag and or into the box in transit, but no, it's just that she's fully not dry, you know. Sam says, wow, would say that she's pretty film accurate. Well, I mean, this version here, yeah, I like her, dude. I'm happy with it. You know, don't get me wrong, I'm not just trying to bag on him. I think that the replica is wonderful. I just don't like that just seems unsafe to ship it while it's still drying, you know. At least, you know, the paint is pink and her dress is pink, because if it was some other way around, it could have potentially bled onto the fabric here, and then that would have been a whole other scenario that I might have been asking for a refund on or something, you know. Because I don't think you can take the clothes off these things without disassembling them. So I'd have no way to wash out the paint. But that's, oh shit, there it goes. See, proof positive of what I was talking about. Of course, you get the certificates of authenticity with them, you know. Not sure what good those do me, but they're nice to have, I suppose. It just makes it feel like more of a legit collector's item, I suppose. So now we're going to take a look at the main man himself right here. And this guy, I've got to kind of move this stuff out of the way because he is massive. I'm not even sure exactly how I'm going to get him to stand up properly in his stand, because he is so gigantic. There's no way these tiny little metal stands that they give you is going to properly support his weight. But, you know, that's kind of the case with a Pinhead back there as well. So I might just have to permanently lean him against the wall, and that'll just be the state of his existence. Obviously, I am talking about this big beefy bastard right here. This is an important moment for me, and this is a very exciting milestone in the full moon collecting, because I've always wanted to get all the puppets, or at least all the mainline proper puppets. I don't necessarily count Dr. Death as a main puppet because he's from Retro Puppet Master, which sucks, and he's not part of the classic line. I consider the puppets that are part of the classic line to be the puppets that were present in like the first, you know, 5 Puppet Master movies, 5 or 6. You know, I guess I would consider the demon guy, you know, if they still had the replica of him available from 4 and 5, I wouldn't mind having one of those. And I really wouldn't mind having a Decapitron. But again, if we're just talking the straight Toulon puppets, you can't have it complete without having 6-shooter and without having Leech Woman. And I was able to, thankfully, score both of them in one fell swoop here during this sale. And I couldn't be happier for it, man. I mean, this guy is magnificent. For the longest time, Jester has been my favorite replica in terms of just sheer craftsmanship. So, you know, that's saying something, because Jester is really well put together, a lot of intricacies in his wardrobe and all that stuff. But 6-shooter just tops them all. This guy is fucking magnificent. So this is one of those moments where we find ourselves in a bit of a conundrum, because where they screwed up a little bit on Leech Woman, this guy's just so fucking glorious that it kind of makes me forgive him, you know? It's hard to be mad when you pull this sumbitch out of the box. Again, though, huge and fucking top heavy. He's like the size of a small child. You know, he could sit on my fucking lap and wish for Christmas gifts, you know? Yeah, and they included his hat, unlike Blade. So once I get Blade's hat, we'll be good. Jester Mikey says Jester and Blade are his 2 favorites. I wouldn't have guessed Jester was your favorite, Mikey. No, he's great, though. When you really look at him, I mean, he's got those little bells, and he's got several different types of fabric that they stitched together to make his whole outfit. I mean, they took some proper time and effort in making the intricacies of Jester really pop out. And he looks the simplest at a glance. I mean, when you look back there, you might think, oh, it's got to be like Tunneler and Torch that are the best. I would say they're both pretty good. I would say Torch is probably second to Jester in terms of craftsmanship, because they did really good on his outfit as well. But when you really get up close to Tunneler, they cut some corners on him, and it shows a little bit. If I was better at working with fabric and stuff, I might try to rework it a little bit and clean it up. But maybe I'll find someone that can do that someday. No refurbishing acquired, though, on 6-shooter here. This boy is magnificent. I mean, he's even got his little pistols, his extra pistols down here. They don't sit in his hand too great, you know. It's like they're not fixed to the hands like the ones on the top. They just kind of rest in there, which is fine once I've got them displayed. But I wouldn't dare move them around like that, because those things seem super fragile. But yeah, there he is, guys. 6-shooter. So the only replicas that I have left to get are Homunculus, Mephisto, and Dr. Death. I don't really count Ginger Weed Man, because I'm not a huge fan of those films. And honestly, if I eventually get him, it'll just be for completionist's sake. But I would really like to see them eventually put out some proper replicas for the demonic toys, because as it currently stands, the only way to really get those is to get them from like third-party people or whatever. The Horror Man Cave is a great place to go if you really want to get your hands on like a Teddy replica or a Jack Attack replica. But I don't know why Full Moon couldn't just put them out themselves. It would probably be a little bit more expensive than the Puppet Master replicas. At least Jack Attack would be. But after seeing, you know, 6-shooter at his price range, I feel like they could do a beastly Jack Attack replica, charge the normal $350 for it that they did for 6-shooter, and people would be happy to pay it. So I don't know. Sam says most of these replicas are designed with Tom Devlin's vision of how he would mold them. Not that much of a fan. I like some of it. I feel like there is a couple, like Blade, you know, I'm not sure that I like the mold of his face. Tunneler, I can agree with certain people's criticisms of that. I think the ones that suffer the least from that are probably like Pinhead and Jester, because they're such simple puppets that it's kind of, you know, there's not too much you can really do with that sculpt. And then obviously, you know, 6-shooter is a little easier to deal with, because he's a relatively new cat on the block when it comes to those puppets. So we only ever really saw him, I think, in one movie before, maybe two, before that dude was the guy that was mainly sculpting them anyways. So it doesn't bother me as much, but yeah, I can see where you're coming from with it, bud. And that does it, guys. You know, that's the end of my 4th of July haul. I think I, invested wisely. I'm glad that I'm caught up to date on those deliriums. I'm glad that I've got these replicas out of the way. And I'm certainly glad that I, got mostly caught up on the new releases. I think in the next sale, I'm probably just going to snag a couple of replicas. And I think that outside of that, I'm going to just start working on getting some of the poster prints that Full Moon has. I'm kind of to the point now where, in terms of collecting their movies, I've got all the mainline stuff, and pretty much most of what I have to buy if I want to actually collect shit is a few odds and ends here and there, the compilation movies, and then like all their sexy, sleazy stuff and the Grindhouse films that they didn't even make, but they just released. So I am going to collect all of that. But yeah, I'm kind of reaching a point here where I'm going to be working mostly in the back end of their merchandise because I've got all the main stuff, But that I still have the whole Laserdisc VHS adventure to go on if I'm really hurting for Full Moon stuff to collect. Chris says, I agree. I think Devlin is pretty terrible as an effects artist. He's like a zero budget JCB, and that's saying something. Yeah, he seems to just get in there and get it done. I almost feel like he's not even so much of a... I don't think of him in the same way I think of other effects artists, I guess, probably because I knew of him because of his horror museum and all that stuff. And he would do haunted houses and shit like that. So I think he's just sort of like an amateur effects artist that happened to eventually get, tagged into these movies. He seems like a rad dude, but I'm not a huge fan of his work. And when you see the behind the scenes stuff, I don't know that there's a lot of work that actually goes into it. Sam says, dope, man. Thanks for the show. Let's keep it going. Thank you. Of course, man. We've got a crash and burn discussion we're going to be doing later on tonight with my buddy Ryan from Canada, provided both of our internet signals hold out. And yeah, after that, I'm actually going to be joining in with the guys over at Inside Movies Galore for a discussion of the animated classic, The Brave Little Toaster. It's a weird direction to go off into after all this stuff, but I'm sure it'll prove to be very interesting. That movie's kind of horrifying too. That part with the air conditioner fucking committing suicide or whatever. I think that's stuck with most of us that grew up on that shit. So should be a good time. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this despite the lack of visual aids here. In the future, like I said, I will make a point to, like the morning before I do something like this, make sure I've got all the trailers uploaded. Because it does break it up and give you guys something to look at other than my ugly mug. And it gives me a moment to collect my thoughts and move into the next thing. I feel like bits of this were kind of rushed, but that's because I was, in the back of my mind, I'm like subconsciously thinking, oh, they're going to get bored if I don't just keep moving through this. Those trailers give us a moment to, it gives us a moment to set the pace. So apologies. Will not be an issue next time. As always, I have been Mosley. You've been a bunch of sexy beasts. This has been yet another episode of that Full Moon Live, baby. We'll see you back here. Well, about an hour or like 45 minutes, depending on when Ryan gets home. So cheers.